be on a podcast with you today. And why don't you give us an introduction of your background?
Yeah, sure. Great to be here. So yeah, my name's Armani. I'm one of the founders and CEO of BackPack. I suppose there's a bunch of stuff that we're working on. We're a self-custodial wallet. We're an international spot derivatives exchange, and we are a group of, I guess, 10,000 MadLads of crazy profile pics that are a rambunctious bunch of crypto natives all around the world. So yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. I think, Armani is one of the founders that I respect the most in the space, and also who I consider as a top leader in the space. So really curious about how you're able to kind of put together so many different products and what was your thought process between each and single one of them. So there's wallet, there's the exchange, there's also the NFTs. Do you mind walking us through how you came up with each collection and products?
Yeah, so I mean, I think each product was kind of a hill climbing to the next problem that I thought like needed to be solved. So we really started with the wallet, and the original motivation was not necessarily a wallet for the sake of the wallet. We originally had this concept that we were really excited about called XNFTs. We've since more or less pivoted away from it. But the thesis at the time was instead of tokenizing images, you can tokenize code and build a whole application ecosystem around it. But I think really where that thinking came from was this kind of updated view of the world back in, let's call it 2021. Solana was growing really quickly. The network was doing really well. It was growing. It was very high performance. And I felt more or less at the time that, okay, a lot of the scaling problems and a lot of the infrastructural problems in crypto were more or less being solved by people a lot smarter than myself. And so I really wanted to shift my focus away from infrastructure and towards building products and the user experiences and thinking about how do we actually bring crypto to people's day-to-day lives and what were like the outstanding problems there. And really the best starting point for that is the wallet. I think self-custody is the most important thing in crypto. Without it, you could kind of question a lot of what we're all doing here. And so I thought that building a self-custodial wallet was like a great starting point. And that kind of segued into a bunch of different things. And so, yeah, we started working on XNFTs. MadLads was a direct result of that. We didn't do an NFT project for the sake of doing an NFT project. We did an NFT project to showcase everything that we were building. So the whole MadLads experience, everything from building the community to the whitelist mint, to the actual mint itself, and even stuff after the mint. You know, every time we rickrolled people or did merch or anything of that nature, or staking or points or whatever, it was always through the product. It's always through BackPack the wallet. It was always through XNFTs, and all of the storytelling was always really an excuse to showcase new things that we've built. And so the NFT community was really all about how do we eat our own cooking, so to speak, with the XNFT protocol and with BackPack the wallet, and that segued and kind of transitioned into its own kind of blossoming, very very genuine community in its own right. And then last but not least is the exchange. Now, I guess that's its own kind of rabbit hole, but I mean, fast forwarding to, I guess, the FTX collapse, and we were kind of in a pretty terrible situation on that front where we had lost, $14.5 million, like just sitting on the exchange at the time of the collapse. That was like 88% of our funds, and the company was, for all intents and purposes, dead. It was a pretty crucible moment for us and for a lot of people in the space at the time. I'm not a crazy person. I didn't want to originally build an exchange. Like that wasn't my first reaction when FTX collapsed. But I think, the big like thing that gave me confidence and then felt that, I felt like we could actually go and like contribute to the exchange space was, just a couple folks that we teamed up with and felt like we had a pretty strong kind of team to go forward and do it. I think building a regulated exchange is like very different than building in like a DeFi exchange or decentralized exchange, in the sense that you need to be really good with not only product engineering, but also you need to solve all the hard problems that traditional financial institutions solve and build out compliance teams and deal with regulators all around the world and have a reasonable strategy for climbing that mountain, which requires a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of expertise, a big team, and so on and so forth. And so yeah, the exchanges is kind of own beast, but that's kind of at least the three prongs of the various businesses that we operate at this point, and I guess a start of where we are today.
Gotcha. Awesome. Amazing journey. So it sounds like you started with wallets, which is with the purpose of bringing, crypto experience to like everyone. And then with the XNFT, I actually thought the design of XNFT is super, super new at the time. And also still like, I don't think that many NFT collections have like iterated quite a lot on like the design of it and like what is the underlying value of the NFTs. And I think both XNFTs and MadLads have done like a really good job at that. So how do you typically kind of see how that these pieces like work together in terms of MadLads for with BackPack the exchange? There's like the trading fee kind of benefits of like holding them. And what are you thinking about in terms of like scaling, the exchange with the fact that NFTs only have like, 10,000 of them? I'm really curious about like, how you're thinking about like the flywheels there. And how your experience been in terms of, going from building something that's more permissionless and community driven to something that's like more compliant and a lot of like acquiring licenses. It sounds like an amazing journey, like building both like compliant and like, more decentralized products. So curious about like your journey there.
So I think it's tempting to want to like go really deep down the NFT rabbit hole when you're building NFTs. I think I saw a tweet the other day, like literally last night, from the Mega ETH founder, where he was expressing some level of unhappiness with his decision to launch the I think I forgot what they're called, like the bunnies, the fluffles, yeah, the fluffle NFT. He was lamenting that it was too early, and that they're not an NFT company. They're a protocol. They need to focus on building a great L2 and make Mega ETH great.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I just like instantly resonated with me, because that was exactly like how I felt in the middle of like MadLads. I remember, when we launched MadLads, it was like hugely successful. There was a ton of hype and just like engagement around it. And it's really easy to get just drunk off of that, like superficial high and all the dopamine of like the external validation of like, oh my God, you have all these people that want this JPEG, but you're not a JPEG company, right? You're there to build a product, and that is an enormous source of noise, especially once you get like the speculative like market behind the artwork. And it can encourage you to make a bunch of really suboptimal decisions. So like maybe the best example of this is when you launch an NFT, the immediate thing that people want you to do is to create all of these arbitrary mechanisms to create scarcity. And why do they want that?
Price.
It's because of they want like the price or whatever. And you could spend a lot of time like thinking about these things and building these things, but every moment that you're spending doing those things, you're not spending making your product great, right?
Yeah.
And so my view of NFTs, at least our approach to MadLads, is we've been very consistent from the beginning. I spent like a year like streaming about the futility of utility to like literally just think about it as artwork. And then the question is, well, how do you build an art project, and why is that useful for like a wallet and an exchange? And I think we are really fortunate in the sense that basically everything in crypto orbits around wallets and exchanges. And there's two products that every NFT holder has. They have a wallet and they have an exchange account. So purely from like a user point of view, it's been like a really wonderful way to build product. But from a community building point of view and an engagement point of view, it's also been a really great way to engage others in our product, whether it's through listings or whether it's through people on different networks wanting to like give airdrops to the MadLads. I mean, I can't even count the number of times at this point that I'll wake up and open up my phone and I'll just see like somebody randomly like did some partnership with the MadLads that I knew nothing about. And it happens all the time. It's like whether it's people going and giving talks inside the Discord, or people airdropping tokens to them, or people doing points boosters, or people asking them to join their Discord for roles, or doing all of these like things. It's all because of the merit and the very real and valuable set of humans and individuals that are behind these profile pics around the world. But at the end of the day, it's an art project. And the question is, well, how do you create good artwork? And my view of this is the same, whether it's, a JPEG on the internet, whether it's music, or whether you're, manually drawing and coloring lines with your hands, right? Artwork is ultimately, from my point of view, about like cultural equity that's embedded into some medium that ultimately has a meaningful story with shared context inside of humans' brains that exists in a period of time in the world. And so, like, what does that mean? Okay, so I think like maybe a good example of this is music. So, like, maybe not to go too much down a rabbit hole, but like, if you ask yourself the question, like, who's like the best guitar player? And you might answer, well, I don't know, and I don't care. But if you ask, like, my parents or whatever, who the best guitar player is, their eyes will light up and they'll have a bunch of like memories of like, some period of time. And they might say something like, I don't know, like Jimi Hendrix. It's like, okay, why was Jimi Hendrix a great guitar player? Was it because like he was like mechanically very good at like strumming the guitar and playing chords and understand music theory really well? It's like, no, probably not. The reason why Jimi Hendrix is the best guitar player in the world is because of the hippie movement, the Vietnam War, and Woodstock. And it was like that period of time where there was all of this dialogue and shared experiences where people, did a bunch of acid or whatever, or like went to these festivals or had all this common discourse around, everything that was happening around the world in the 60s or whatever. And it was that experience that created that cultural equity that was imbued and embedded into the music that lives with the music till this day. And so that I think is like a useful example to illustrate like I think how to build artwork. And it's ultimately just about stories and shared experiences. And that's kind of the approach to MadLads. It's not about like creating utility. It's not about intrinsic value. It's not about discounted cash flows. That's great for a business, but that's not how you build really great artwork and how you build culture. And so with MadLads, I think it's a really wonderful medium for anybody that's interested in living through this crypto native I guess like movement and journey that we've all been building in for the past however many years. And when you have a wallet and you have an exchange, it's like a great medium to share that experience and that journey with all these people all around the world.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that was a very thoughtful answer there. Like over the years, we've seen other projects who have done, NFT collections, and I would argue like most of them have not like, hit the level of success that MATLAS have. Like should focus to like talk
Sure.
a little bit more about exchanges and
Sure.
yeah. Yeah, I think MadLads have not only done really well on the culture front and also, the community and also the kind of utility, like you can see how strong they are in terms of a lot of the momentums. Yeah, really curious. So sounds like you guys, you didn't give up among the bottom of the market for Solana, for post FTX collapse. And I'm curious, like, what kind of made you make the decision beyond, you guys have a great team to build the centralized exchange, and would love to know, kind of how you're thinking about, like, in terms of what users want when it comes to a centralized exchange, and also where BackPack is like heading towards, like, in terms of the vision and the plans for the future.
Yeah, so I mean, you have to think about these things like from first principles, right? It's like fundamentally, why is what you're doing correct? And why is it better for the world? And like, what is the marginal value that you're creating over your competitor or whatever currently exists in the market. And the thesis, I think, behind BackPack is very simple, which is to say that there's two versions of the future for the crypto industry at large. One version of the future is more or less to stay where we're at today, which is that, okay, crypto is more or less a drop in the bucket. It's totally irrelevant. It's a small niche, unregulated, mostly offshore part of the global economy, and everything that we're building today is mostly meaningless in the grand scheme of things, right? People, we're sitting here in New York. It's the finance capital of the world. If you compare, everything that's happening in crypto relative to what's happening in New York, it's kind of more or less nothing.
Yeah.
It's like the one-liner is that all of the value in crypto is less than Nvidia's market cap, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's fine. If you view the industry as a casino or whatever, it's a hell of a casino and it's a great technology for that. But I think there's a lot more that the industry can do. So there's second version of the future, which is the thing that wakes up or where I wake up and get inspired every day, and something that I think a lot of us are building towards, which is that we believe that crypto will eat finance in the same way that software ate the world. We think that all of traditional finance will come on chain. We think that fundamentally, crypto is financial transaction processing technology. It is purpose-built tech to make transactions cheaper, more efficient, less error-prone, and can coordinate global capital in a way that's never been done before. And so I think if you ask yourself, what are the companies and the technologies that need to exist for that latter world? I think I would frame the conversation in two ways. A lot of people like to talk about decentralized exchanges versus centralized exchanges. I think that's the wrong framing. And I think that comes at the question very much from like an engineering mind, which is like architecturally, how do you build the systems? But instead, I like to think of them more in terms of like what are the properties that you're leaning into with the thing that you're building. And I think, instead of decentralized versus centralized, I think in terms of censorship resistance versus compliance. And so I think from this perspective, the things to build are very clear. From first principles, what are the things that blockchains give you that traditional finance does not?
Yeah.
And the first thing I think that it gives you is global capital formation. The metaphor I like to give to people is like an ocean. And you think about like the Pacific Ocean, like what is like, why is the US comfortable sending shipping containers to, I don't know, Japan, or why is Taiwan comfortable sending shipping containers to the US? And it's like, well, we're not afraid. The U.S. is not afraid that like the Chinese government will capture the shipping containers and steal whatever cargo is in the ocean, right? It's like it's a credibly neutral medium for transacting. And then likewise, China is comfortable using the Pacific as well because it doesn't think the U.S. will capture or steal any of its goods or services either, right? And a blockchain is nothing more to me than a credibly neutral data ocean where not any single person controls it. It doesn't matter if you're in the US, it doesn't matter if you're in China, it doesn't matter if you're Japan, Africa, South America, Europe, whatever. It's censorship resistant, it's decentralized, it's credibly neutral. There's no single point of control. All I need is an internet connection, a terminal, and a validator, and I can get access to this trust minimized computing machine that can bring together all these different parties, regardless of where they are in the world, to have this like canonical ledger that we all agree is correct. And so censorship resistance is super important because that's just fundamentally useful in a way that traditional finance is not.
Yeah, quick question here. So, if blockchain is like an open ocean, and I think it makes sense to us, right? We've been in crypto for so long, and what does that mean for like a normal user? Say that like my mom, if she never used crypto, like what does that bring in terms of the unique product experience or unique thing that they can only get with crypto for like normal users. Because like one of the biggest thing I hear is that a lot of the normal users get drowned into crypto for price actions, and then they might like lose money from the speculation, and then they leave without having like really benefit from like what crypto really uniquely bring. So question, like, what do you think crypto can bring to like normal users that traditional finance or traditional tech cannot do?
Yeah. So, I mean, piggybacking on this, like, this oceanic metaphor, I suppose. Really, what that credible neutrality gives you is the ability for distinct parties that don't trust each other to work together. And what that manifests itself into is ultimately global capital formation. And so there's like two very immediate consequences of this.
Yeah.
The first is just internet capital markets. This is the meme on Solana right now because it's a very good meme and it's very real, which is to say that if you can bring together money from untrusted parties all around the world, in theory, you can have more deep, more liquid markets that lead to better price execution, basically faster price discovery and more price and better price execution. And the global nature of it, the borderless nature of it, is what makes that possible. Otherwise, you're confined to the singular kind of rules in whatever region that you're serving users in, and that credible neutrality is what gives you the global presence. So I think that's the first thing. It's like you open up the app and you can, no matter where you are in the world, you can get access to any financial instrument that you want, and it'll be faster, it'll be cheaper, it'll be less likely that you'll have any issues with it, and that ultimately leads to like a better price. And I think where this becomes most interesting is when you start talking about exporting U.S. capital markets to other parts of the world. So if you're in the U.S., maybe none of this really is that interesting to you. But if you're in, let's say, China, you're in Nigeria, you're in, pick your, favorite part of the world that maybe doesn't have access to like a Robinhood account. Things like stable coins and exporting the U.S. dollar are pretty interesting. Where, well, if I want to, send dollars to my family member and pick your wherever you're from in China or in the Philippines or in Argentina or whatever, you can do that instantly and in a way that's faster, cheaper, and just more effective. And so it's global capital formation as a primitive, or as a abstract like way of thinking about what permissionlessness gives you, in the same way that like an ocean allows you to be a medium of transacting like across the seas or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, to like piggyback on like what you just said, can I interpret it as like, crypto is like great for like tokenizing kind of intangible values or maybe tangible values, but tangible values I think they've had like a hard time putting things like actually binding and on chain. So it has always been a kind of like speculation around like in more or less like intangible values, right? So I'm really curious here, because I think a lot of the kind of permissionless, formation of capital, means that anyone can participate in any like protocols, and that itself means like anyone can launch a token, and it causes like price actions and price discoveries. And I think sometimes we've seen this like cycles over cycles where there's like people who just launch a coin and without underlying backing like values, and it kind of like over time we just see like the spike due to speculation, and then it like falls like after. I'm really curious, do you have any views on like how you kind of design the either it's like tokenomic like renovations, or perhaps like how do we tokenize more or less like tangible values, or like more just give these tokens more or less like underlying values so that the price doesn't fall to like zero over time? And there may not be an answer. So yeah, I'm really curious on that.
So I mean, I think there's a couple ways to slice this. I think when I was answering the previous question, I gave you two sides of a spectrum. I said, on the one hand, there's censorship resistance, but on the other hand, there's compliance. And I didn't touch on the compliance part, but that's actually where I think BackPack is trying to kind of play a role, I think, in crypto more broadly. And to answer your question, it's like, well, how do I get tangible, valuable things sitting on blockchains? Well, the answer is, well, the tangible, valuable things are physical, and physical things tend to exist in the context of a broader society, right? You don't live in an industry; you live in a society with the rule of law. And this is the thing. It sounds kind of silly to say out loud, especially to people outside of crypto, but people get so caught up in the permissionless nature of things that they realize that, oh, this is actually a really important part of the equation as well. Like if I want to own part of Apple, it doesn't exist on the internet. Apple is physically located in Cupertino, and they follow whatever laws that exist in the U.S. and in California.
Yeah.
And so at the base layer, you may have permissionlessness, but at the application layer and at the tangible value layer, you have compliance. And that is, as you go up the application stack, I think particularly in the context of finance, which is maybe famous for, having a ton of rules and regulations, like that is a really important part of the equation as well. And so to answer your question, how do you have more tangible value? The answer is, it almost sounds silly to say, but like you have to play by whatever rules and requirements that exist in the thing that governs the tangible value. So the best and most exciting example of this to me is just like the obvious thing, U.S. equities. Like it's it's a huge market. That's where all of the value that's not all of it, but a large amount of the value is created in the world. As I said earlier, Nvidia's market cap is greater than everything in crypto combined. Go tokenize that, put that on chain, and then boom, there's tangible value right there. And it's like, okay, well, how do you do that? And you don't just concoct an equation, write some code, and put it on Solana. You actually have to go build out and acquire the licenses and do the compliance tech and become a broker dealer and do all these kind of hard things that normal financial institutions have to do, so that you can actually start fulfilling this overarching dream that the entire industry has of upgrading the financial system. But you have to go the full stack. There's not just technical problems. There's a lot of non-technical problems as well. And I think that is, in my view, like a large part of the story for the industry over the next couple of years. So it's like, okay, we know how to build markets at this point. We can do that pretty well. Now let's go make those markets valuable and escape this Ouroboros snake eating the tail meme that a lot of people have been complaining about, and all this financial nihilism that exists. But let's actually go bring real value, bring it on chain. And that starts by recognizing that, well, we live in a broader world, and let's go work with that broader world instead of pretending that it doesn't exist.
Amazing. Actually, there's a lot of things I have questions about what we just said. So I'll ask a question for the user. So can we expect U.S. equities on chain or U.S. equities potentially on BackPack exchange?
I think somebody's going to do it. I think somebody's going to do it, and they're going to do it really well. I don't know if that's BackPack. I don't know if it's Robinhood. I don't know if it's somebody else. I think the moment that happens at scale, the industry looks very different in a very exciting and inspiring way. And so I think it's one of those products that a lot of people have talked about for a very long time. A lot of people have taken their own shots at goal. But I think directionally speaking, it might not be U.S. equities. Maybe U.S. equities don't belong on chain, but directionally speaking, I think that is the direction that I think I would like BackPack and the industry at large to move into.
Yeah, actually, back in the days, when I was trading at Pantera, we used FTX quite a lot. And I tried out their product, which is a U.S. equity perp. There was not much liquidity back then. They basically put, Tesla, Apple, stocks, as perps. Because it fulfill the purpose if you just want to trade, but not necessarily put the spot equities on chain. I think that no one has quite done it yet. And I was actually having the similar conversation with Robert Lashner, who built Compound, and he's now building, I think, Superstate, and where they want to put like U.S. Treasury on chain and give people like the yield to like offshore and like basically like permissionless like crowd. And the challenge with that is that one of the biggest benefit of crypto is the geographical like jurisdiction kind of like regulatory kind of arbitrage where it's some crypto is legal in some places and like purpose legal in some places but not legal in others. And even in the US there's a lot of arguments within the which jurisdiction or regulatory body like is responsible for like regulating crypto. Like that has been like an ongoing conversation for a long time. So do you think the kind of US equity on chain or like US these assets on chain would maybe even happen, offshore of US because there's like regulatory kind of benefits and then like maybe come back to the US?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how that is going to manifest itself in terms of operationally, like who regulates what part of it and all that stuff. I do think that if you think about the marginal values of the world, like who benefits the most from this, I think it's, at least from a retail point of view, if you're sitting in New York, it's pretty easy to get a Robinhood account, and that's a great user experience.
Yep.
You get an E-Trade account or whatever. But it's really when you're sitting outside of the US and other parts of the world where that becomes really compelling to you. And being able to tap into those markets and participate in the global economy in a way that you might not have been able to previously, I think is a big part of like the value proposition that this technology is bringing to the world. And so I think from a product point of view, that's kind of my view on it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's super interesting. Do you mind sharing with us like what do you have in mind in terms of roadmap for BackPack the exchange or the wallet?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I saw you guys are working on Monad.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things. So I'll start with the exchange and then I'll talk about the wallet. So on the exchange side, I think what's maybe underappreciated about what we're doing, or you might not appreciate it, especially if you're quite crypto native, is that we don't willy-nilly serve users around the world. Unlike basically every other crypto company, like we don't serve any folks here in New York at the moment. We don't serve any folks in Texas. There's like we don't serve Europe at the moment. Like we don't serve Japan at the moment. There are large parts of the world with an enormous amount of value that we just simply don't serve because we are trying to build a regulated company and trying to do it right. We're not trying to play this regulatory arbitrage game that people like to play. We acknowledge that we're centralized. We have, and as a result, we have kind of a duty to follow whatever centralized rules that exist in whatever region that we're offering the product to users. I think, and so for us, that is really the first mountain to climb, which is ultimately getting to the starting line and being able to actually offer the product to, large parts of the world. And so ever since the exchange launched, that's really one of the large efforts that we've taken upon ourselves. Where we started in the UAE, we got licensed in Dubai, moved over to Tokyo. I've been in Japan for the past year and a half, going through the licensing process there. In Japan, we've made an enormous amount of progress there, and most recently we acquired FTX EU so that we can make inroads. Thank you. So that we can make inroads into Europe. There's still a ton of work to do there, but we're trying to build this exchange and we're trying to do all the right things and dot every I and cross every T and take no shortcut, and that starts on the licensing and on the compliance side of things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just the product. I think that's maybe something that I'm even more comfortable with, and we launched Perps about 3 weeks ago. That's going well. Thanks. We're starting our go-to-market there. That's pretty exciting. And then, I think for the rest of the year, it's really all about just bringing this product to large parts of the world that, either don't have it already, or for which we currently just can't serve them because we just have to go through the process to get the licensing and whatnot. So I think for us, a lot of the work that we're doing is like with the sexy filter removed. Like these are not sexy problems, like going and getting like fiat on and off ramps and bank accounts and licenses are like not stuff that you like go write blog posts about and say like, oh, look at this, visionary that built this really cool AI model or whatever. They're really boring problems, but they're really important problems because there's not a lot of companies in crypto that are doing this. And we think if we can just work on these problems for a long period of time, make these inroads and solve these problems, then we will have something to contribute to the broader industry. And so that's kind of like what we're doing on the exchange side, just like heads down, doing the work and trying to solve these, boring and unsexy problems. But hopefully the bet is that they'll pay off over a long period of time. So that's the exchange side. The wallet side is a bit of a different story. So excuse me, there's two things happening on the wallet side. The first thing is we put a lot of work into making it relatively easy to add chains. We fully, I'm a Solana maximalist or whatever. I'm also Ethereum maximalist. I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm a multi-chain maximalist. I think I firmly believe that there will be many chains. If I didn't believe there would be many chains, I never would have gone into Solana in the first place. And so, you mentioned Monad. I'm super excited about Monad. It's an amazing team, but there's many awesome L1s that are coming up. So we'll put a ton of work into that to make it easy to add L1s. Today we support Solana, Ethereum, Eclipse, Sonic, Base, Arbitrum, Optimism, Monad, Testnet, so on and so forth. So just having an application where I can connect to any dApp, no matter what chain it's on, bridge my assets anywhere, and have a really great user experience is like the first, very obvious problem to solve. The second problem to solve is not so obvious. So, the other day I opened up my phone. I love telling this story, so I apologize if you've heard it before. But I opened up my phone. I signed up for a Solana wallet, and I set up my seed phrase. And when you set up the seed phrase, this is the Soulflare app, and they tell you a jaw-dropping statistic. They tell you that $4.2 billion is lost every year to people that lose access to their seed phrase. $4.2 billion. That's crazy. That's more than every centralized exchange collapse combined. It's a complete and total, utterly spectacular failure of the industry. So the single most important thing, self-custody, absolutely, positively, indisputably does not work. I don't think how you cannot conclude anything else from that statistic. If you believe those numbers, do your own research, check it yourself. I'm just telling you what the app told me. $4.2 billion. So clearly this is a problem. Somebody has to solve this. Luckily, this is a very solvable problem. And it's actually relatively straightforward to solve. There's a bunch of hard stuff that are, in practice, quite challenging and time consuming, but in theory, it's very easy to solve. Maybe without going into all the technical details, the TLDR is just what all the Ethereum people like to refer to as account abstraction. Yeah. So, long story short, it's like you can build the best possible wallet if you have an exchange, where it can be completely recoverable. If you throw your ledger or your hot wallet or your passkey or whatever ED25519 key pair is, you can throw it into the ocean, completely lose it, and just call up your exchange account and recover it in the exact same way you would recover your bank account or you recover your exchange account, go through the compliance team or whatever, and you get your money back. However, the trick is to do this without losing self-custody. And that is what makes it like such an interesting conversation, is because it's a lot of people would approach this problem by just introducing centralization. Just trust me, bro. Like you give up self-custody, come to my, exchange, or you have some centralized thing and you get the key, and we just control it unilaterally. But that's not required. You could actually build solutions that don't require losing self-custody. And so that category of that problem space is like really fascinating to me. And I think it's going to be a really important part of the evolution of wallets down the road.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Privy is trying to solve, except for I don't actually think Privy is self-custodial. They may claim that it's self-custodial, but it's not. Like they still hold like users' keys. So I think with like whatever solution that actually works, where I can just memorize my email, my password, and like the assets are like recoverable to some extent. and in the same time you don't hold Mad like private keys so that you can't move Mad funds, is actually a big unlock and it's a much bigger like step about like FTX and preventing things like that from happening, in my opinion. Yeah, I think if that can be solved, that's actually a really big step up. What about for the users who have wallets but don't have the exchange account? Because as you mentioned, right, like exchange, only works in certain locations due to the licensing. And what happens to the users that only has a wallet?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, first I have no idea how Privy works, so I don't want to comment on them. But I think as it relates to the exchange, I mean, so first we will have licensing everywhere, so I'm not really worried about that in the long term. There is some segment of people that maybe don't want to associate their self-custodial wallet to an exchange account, and I certainly would acknowledge that. I think it's a relatively small segment of people, but it is an important segment of people. You could totally build this construct. I haven't actually articulated it, although I'm happy to, but it's a bit technical and maybe not super great for the audience. But you can build such a construct without an exchange. You just need some type of infrastructure provider. However, I would argue, I don't know if you feel this way, but I certainly feel this way, that you don't want some random company doing this, right? I personally feel much more comfortable knowing that the single party that can recover my key seed phrase, if God forbid I've passed away or something like that, is a prudentially supervised, regulated financial institution with a well-trained and rigorously kind of managed compliance team, right? Where they actually look at my identity, they check my government documents, and they only like give my life savings to my spouse if I'm actually Armani, right? You don't want like some random company doing that, right? And so I think that would be the pitch I would make to people. That's actually like pretty important that this is done by a properly kind of regulated company. Although I think there's plenty of people that might not want that, and I recognize that. But yeah, the construction can be applied more broadly. You just need some party that's willing to take on the operational burden of doing this. The nice thing about the exchange is that we'll do it for free, right? So we're happy for it to be a loss leader. We don't need to make money on this. We just want to be considered a reasonable place to manage your finances or whatever, and we can make money in other ways. And so it's a very natural thing for an exchange to do, and maybe not such a natural thing for other folks to do. But really the trick is that we have to define self-custody. What self-custody means is very simple. I have my ledger or my key pair of some sort. I have an internet connection, a terminal, and an access to a validator. That's it. And if I have those things, I have my money. And no single person can ever unilaterally take my money away from me. That's self-custody. And anything that violates that is not self-custody. And so just to be like maybe super precise with definitions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. To ask more questions from our users and builders, like I think you have a unique following where a lot of people who follow you and look up to you are both like builders as well as they like exchange users or the NFT like collection or community people. So we'd love to ask some questions on behalf of both maybe the builder side. Like, do you have any advice for builders today? And then later on, we can dive into your advice for maybe chat more about like, I know it's a sensitive topic when it comes to like listing or exchanges.
Sure.
But I think it'll give people like a direction in terms of like when they're building, like what is the criteria that an exchange like BackPack are looking for when it comes to listing?
I think the two pieces of advice I would give are really simple. You probably have heard these pieces of advice a million times before, but you need to hear them a million times because it's really hard to internalize them. The first piece of advice is simple. Crypto, I mean, this might sound silly and might upset people, but crypto is not special. Crypto is, if you're building a startup in crypto, it's the exact same thing as building a startup anywhere else. Yes, there are things that make crypto special, right? There's like a cultural element. There's an ideological element. Community is very real. All that's real. I don't want to discredit that. But when it comes to building a business, it's exactly the same thing as building a normal, startup, in the Y Combinator sense of the term. And so all of the lessons that you'll learn from reading Paul Graham's essays, or you'll learn in Y Combinator, or like any other kind of startup journey, all apply to crypto. And you're not like special because you're in crypto. Right, your job is not to build a community. Your job is not to build a token. Job is not to make the price go up. Your job is to build great products that people love, that solve problems, that make the world better, more interesting, more fun, more efficient, or to make net new things that didn't exist previously that the world wants, and that's it. And that's not creative. This is, a lot of people a lot smarter than me have said this before, but this is something that needs to be said over and over again, I think, to people in crypto.
Just jump in there real quick. Arguably, I agree with it. Build things that people want. It's easier to say than done in crypto, where the whole industry, like you said, is like smaller than Nvidia. So, question here is like, over cycles and cycles for myself, like the things I've seen with PMF, a lot of them are surprisingly, not surprisingly, exchanges and marketplaces and wallets. So there's not that many like things on the application level that get like sustainable traction, I would say. So that is why, if you look at Uniswap, Magic Eden, like DYDX, and all these companies end up building the same things. Like, they have an exchange, they have a wallet, and then they have a chain, and they have a token. So do you have any advice for, builders who want to build something that people want, but not necessarily, should they just build another wallet? Should they just build another exchange? How do they think of other products that people actually want to use that can be like bigger?
I think the difference is that all the products that you mentioned have not gone the distance. Not to discredit any of them, but there's a much bigger world out there than just, the people that are currently, building in the industry today, right? And there's an enormous amount of very, hard and unsexy problems to solve. Whether it's figuring out how to do like remittances globally and get fiat on and off ramps, not in the U.S. but also in Brazil, and also in Europe, and in the Philippines, and in Japan, and like, how do you actually do that, right? Like, how do you go get client money accounts in all those places and deal with like local payment providers and ACH in the U.S. and SEPA in Europe and PIX in Brazil or whatever, and I think it's tempting to like build the product, have like some initial like set of users, and then like things one done, right? I built the marketplace, here's the order book, it's over. But there's actually like a million other like really small problems to solve that you need to go like really, really deep to actually build the great user experience.
Yeah, question here. I agree. There are many problems that people can like build, and it's like that's like what people want. Do you notice like what are the specific problems that can uniquely be solved by crypto versus like it doesn't have to be crypto?
Yeah. I think the first thing is from the BackPack point of view, it's access to markets. So, for example, if I want to buy Tesla stock and I'm sitting, pick your favorite part of the world. If I'm sitting in, mainland China, right? How do I buy it, right? And it's like, well, that's a contentious topic, right? It's like maybe they don't want that. They have capital controls and all these things, right? But that's the direction you're pushing the world into, right? Or to like unified, borderless capital markets, where there's lots of people in certain parts of the world that want access to like U.S. companies but don't, and you need crypto to actually tear down those borders, and create that permissionless access to that I think really only crypto can do, right? You cannot do that in traditional finance, and I think that's the lens through which I view a lot of this through, which is like, okay, a lot of it's just rebuilding what currently exists in the U.S., but doing it at a global scale, and in a way that's like, solves not only, the access problem, but also, the kind of efficiency and problem. So like maybe another good example of this is just like, systemic collapses. So like, whether it's FTX or one of the many other collapses in finance over the past 100 years, like, right, the history of finance is just riddled with these things. And it's like, okay, just like make sure that doesn't happen anymore. Like that's like a reasonable problem statement, right? And it's like, well, how do you actually do this? And it turns out like a lot of this tech is like purpose built to prevent these types of things from happening. And that's like a really hard problem to solve. It's like prevents financial collapse, right? But ultimately, that's like the lens I view it through, and it's like I very much believe in like the upgrade the financial system meme that like people like to spread, because that's like ultimately what you're doing, right? And so a lot of it's not like net new things and more, at least through our lens, but it's more about upgrading what currently exists.
Gotcha. Seems like there's two keywords. There's like specialist to the access, and then there's like the assets or markets for like price discoveries. I think that makes a lot of sense. As we're like getting closer to the 1 hour mark, we'd love to ask maybe some final questions. So
Sure.
for
I
myself,
apologize. I have to. I have a call. I have that meeting I have to get to in 15 minutes, so we're gonna have to wrap this up. Yeah.
no
Sorry.
no worries. So we're building DM Cash as a new product. So what it does is basically makes people pay at auction to get to your DMs, and if you read or respond to them, you get paid the amount that they sent you. So this is kind of like tokenizing, to some extent, like people's time, but also access to talk to someone. And do you have any advice like for us for DM Cash?
I wouldn't say I have any advice other than
Just try it out.
yeah, I like get the product into
User's hands.
I was gonna say Anatoly's hands because
Anatoly's hands.
because like somebody like him, his time's so valuable. So many people want his advice, and
Same for you, though.
he's
like I imagine people want to send like $1,000 to get like your advice on something.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my advice is probably a lot less valuable than his. But sorry, not to throw him under the bus. He just tweets about. I see him tweeting about these. We were talking about this earlier. He's always tweeting about these types of services. I feel so he would be a great user. But
gotcha. Get to totally. If you're watching this,
yeah.
welcome to try it out.
Yeah, I don't. Somebody like him, I suppose. I think there's been a couple products like this before. Mm-hmm. I would find those products and talk to the founders and ask why it did or did not work.
Yeah, I think crypto is definitely interesting. I guess like last question for the MadLads communities is that is there anything on the roadmap for MadLads communities, or it's like fully decentralized and decided by the communities?
Yeah, so we've never had a roadmap. We will never have a roadmap. And the answer to that question is roadmaps are silly, they're dumb, and roadmaps are lies. And we will never lie to people. So
we're not going to see a spring or fall fashion show from all that?
Who knows? Maybe we'll do a fashion show. That would be fun.
Yeah.
But no roadmap, unfortunately.
Awesome. And as a sneak peek, is there? Could you share with us what is the next like location or country wise that BackPack will be available?
I think the two countries that we're actively working on right now are Japan and Europe. Yeah.
Amazing. That's a very big answer. Amazing. Yeah, I saw the acquisition news, and I think that's definitely like on the way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have questions for Armani?
Maybe just like 1 minute of your time, because for someone like
new to crypto,
kind of like just testing my feet in the industry from January and on chain trading, all that stuff. Like, what advice would you give to young talents? Like, what are some success criteria should we look for?
I mean, the advice I would give is most people come into crypto to get rich. Like let's just be real. That's why people come. That's why a lot of people come into crypto. They come in with the sole purpose of making money and then leaving.
Yep.
I think if you come in with that mentality,
because they lost money and they're trying to make it back.
If you come in with that mentality, there's a high probability that you will not make money and you will lose money and that you'll be very unhappy. I think this is true for any type of financial market. And so I think liberating yourself from this requirement to like have to make it in a single cycle, I think is the most important thing that you can do. You'll see all these people making so much money. Whether they actually make the money or not is like a separate question. You'll see, mainstream media reporting, why all your friends are getting rich except for you. You'll feel, envy, jealousy, hate of between like you, your competitors, your friends, whatever. And I think this is a very dangerous place to be. And if you just free your mind from that constraint to have to, get in, make a lot of money, and then exit over a single cycle, but instead to, and not to sound trite, I say this like all the time. People are probably so bored of me saying it, but this is just my honest answer. Like, this is my third cycle, right? And like you just got to keep going over a long period of time. And if you just change your kind of view to, devote your life to something as opposed to like, try to do it in like a year or two, like the world looks very differently and you'll make very different decisions and you'll be much happier. And I think the expected value of your success will be much higher. And so, yeah, it's like boring old man advice, but I just genuinely believe it. And I think, yeah, you kind of have to like live through a couple cycles to like maybe fully adopt that. But don't get caught up in a single cycle and just, I guess be in it for the long term, as trite and ridiculous as that sounds.
Yeah, I like that. Chase after success, you won't get it, but chase after greatness, you won't get success will chase after you.
That's a much more concise and elegant way to put it. Yeah.
I'm just seeing like my mom sent me this all the time.
Sounds like you have a wise mother. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's get a round of applause for Armani.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And I learned a lot from this interview, and hopefully so do the audience too. And thank you so much for your time. And hopefully we'll see you guys in Japan. And good luck with everything. And hopefully to see the Japan and European market being open for BackPack.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome.
All right. Hey.